I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Jake and I'm 34. I married Emily about 5 years ago. We had a good life, or at least I thought so. She was beautiful, fiery, and I thought she loved me. We didn't have kids yet, but we talked about it, planned on building a future together. Everything seemed fine until about 2 months ago when I started noticing little things that didn't add up. It all started with her phone. Emily's always been pretty protective of it, but suddenly she was hiding it more, taking calls in the bathroom, locking it when she was in bed, and she'd get really defensive if I asked to see who she was talking to. I didn't push at first, but I noticed her texts were getting a little more flirtatious with some guy, calling him babe, and telling him how hot she thought he was. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, I felt a strange tightness in my stomach every time I saw her giggle at her phone, or when she'd get defensive about her privacy. Then one night I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. As I walked in, I heard her laughing from the bedroom. I didn't think much of it, maybe she was talking to a friend. But when I peeked around the corner, what I saw made my stomach drop. Emily was in bed on her phone, and just as I looked, she quickly closed it and turned to me with this innocent, "Hey, babe, you're early" attitude. But her face was flushed, her hair a little messy, and I could see the faint outline of a sexy lingerie set she'd bought recently. That was weird because she'd told me she'd thrown it out after our last fight about her being too flirtatious. Then I noticed the scent on her, some kind of perfume that didn't belong to her, and her makeup was a little more done up than usual. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I saw. I kept going back to that feeling, that gnawing suspicion that maybe she was cheating on me. It wasn't just the sneaking around with her phone, it was the way she acted when she'd come home late, the way she'd suddenly say she was working late or meeting a friend when I knew damn well she was not. One thing's for sure, I had never felt this betrayed before. I used to think I knew her, thought she was honest. Turns out she's been lying for a while now. I started digging through her things when she was out of town visiting her sister. I found messages, pictures, and some texts from a guy named Mike, a guy I knew she'd recently met at some social event. There were full-on sex messages, explicit pictures, and a lot of talk about how much she needed him and how she couldn't wait to see him again. That's when I knew for sure. Emily was cheating, and not just a little, she was deep in it. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. The worst part, she was lying to my face every time I asked her if she was seeing anyone else. She'd call me paranoid, say I was overthinking, accuse me of being insecure. But I knew what I saw, what I found. And I knew she'd been lying this whole time. It was like my world was crashing down, and I didn't even know how to face her after that. After I found all that stuff on her phone and in our emails, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head, her words, her lies, the way she looked at me like I was crazy when I questioned her. I felt this cold rage building up inside me, mixed with sadness because I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. But now I wasn't so sure. How could she do this to me? To us, that betrayal hit harder than anything I'd ever experienced. The next morning, I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I waited until she woke up, then I sat her down in the living room. My voice was shaky but firm. I told her everything I'd found out, laid out the messages, the pictures, everything. I watched her face change. First, she tried to deny it, then she got defensive, then she started lying outright. "Oh, come on, Jake," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're reading into things. It's not what you think. Mike's just a friend. We're just talking. You're overreacting because you're insecure." I couldn't believe her. She was so quick to dismiss what I'd shown her like I was the crazy one. I told her I knew she was lying, that I had proof. Her face twisted into something uglier, like she was angry I was exposing her. Suddenly she got really bitchy, snapping back, "You're so possessive. You act like I belong to you. Maybe I need some excitement. I'm pregnant, Jake, not dead." She spat those words out like they meant nothing, like she was some victim. That's when I felt the cold, burning fury inside me turn into something darker. She was trying to make it seem like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was overreacting just because I was hurt. She kept lying, kept denying everything, and I realized she had been lying for months. The worst part, I saw her flirt with Mike just the week before, after I'd started noticing her distance. She brushed it off then, said I was imagining things, but here we are now. I told her I needed some space, that I could be around her right now. That's when she threw that little pregnant thing at me like it was some kind of weapon. I told her I didn't care about her excuses anymore. If she was going to cheat on me, I deserved to know the truth, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I felt broken, angry, betrayed, and honestly, I wanted to tear her apart. But I kept my cool, mostly because I knew I needed to think, plan what to do next. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I kept thinking about was how she had lied so easily, how she was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. She slept in the guest room, probably to avoid facing me, but I could hear her crying, or maybe just pretending. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal. My mind kept racing. I kept questioning everything about our relationship, about what I really meant to her. I was hurt worse than I ever thought possible, and I knew I needed to figure out how to move forward, but I had no idea where to start. Over the next few days, I kept my distance, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd uncovered. Every time I looked at her, I saw this thin veneer of innocence she was trying to cling to, but behind her eyes I could see the guilt, the lies. I started to realize that she wasn't going to come clean on her own. She was a master at hiding things, and I knew I was going to have to take control if I wanted any chance of getting the truth, or at least some clarity. I decided to do some digging into Mike, her boyfriend, or whatever he was. I started tracking his social media, looking into his friends, his activities. Turns out, Mike was just a guy she met at some bar, but he was a player, a typical guy who liked to chase women and felt no remorse about cheating himself. I found out he had a reputation for messing around, and I learned that he'd been trying to get Emily to meet up with him again. That was the trigger for me. I needed to confront this guy, but not just with words. I wanted to send a message that she couldn't ignore. While I was doing all this, Emily started acting even more bitchy. She was snappier, more dismissive, throwing insults my way whenever I tried to talk about what was going on. She'd say I was possessive, paranoid, or crazy for accusing her. But I knew her better than she thought. I knew she was lying and cheating. I could see it in her eyes every time she tried to gaslight me. She kept insisting she was done with Mike, that it was just a fling, just a mistake she regretted. But I knew better than to believe that. One day I caught her in a lie. She said she was going to the grocery store, but I found her car at Mike's apartment complex. I saw her parked there, her purse in the passenger seat. That was it. I felt this surge of rage and heartbreak all at once. I realized she had been lying to me the entire time, even about small things. She was a pro at covering her tracks, but I was starting to see through all her bullshit. I decided that I had to confront her directly. No more hiding, no more pretending everything was okay. That night I sat her down again. This time I was colder. I told her I knew everything. I told her I knew she was sleeping with Mike right after I found out I was pregnant, that she had been lying for months, betraying me, cheating on me behind my back. Her face went pale for a moment, then she snapped back with that bitchy attitude. "You're overreacting, Jake. I never meant for it to go this far. It was just sex, just a mistake. I didn't think you'd find out like this." I looked at her and realized how much she was lying. She was trying to make me feel guilty, trying to spin it so I'd be the bad guy. But I wasn't going to fall for her bullshit anymore. I told her she could keep lying, but I was done. I told her I'd be leaving soon, and I wanted her out of the house. I couldn't have this betrayal hanging over me anymore. I told her she'd ruined everything, and I didn't want to see her face again until she was honest about everything. The house felt emptier than ever. I felt numb, like I'd lost a part of myself. I was angry, confused, and heartbroken all at once. I never thought she'd do this, especially not while I was carrying her child. It was a brutal wake-up call. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd been so blind. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to think about what I wanted now, whether to fight for this mess or cut my losses and start over. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with everything I just uncovered and said. The betrayal cut deep, But what hurt even more was the realization that Emily had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. She kept insisting that her affair with Mike was just a one-time thing, some stupid mistake she regretted, but I didn't buy it. How could I? I had all the proof right there, the messages, the photos, the times she was sneaking around. And yet, she still had the nerve to act like I was the crazy one. The next day, I decided I'd had enough. I told her I wanted her out of the house, that I couldn't live with someone who lied to my face and cheated on me. She tried to argue, of course. She said I was overreacting, that it was just sex, that she still loved me, and that I was being paranoid. But I didn't want to hear it. I told her I didn't believe her anymore and that, from this point on, I needed her to leave. I wanted my space, my peace, and to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life from here. What happened next was a shock even to me. Emily got bitchier, more aggressive. She started yelling, saying I was a controlling asshole, that she was still pregnant with my kid, and that she had to stay here because she needed to think. I looked at her, and honestly I felt this mix of disgust and pity. She was using her pregnancy as a weapon, trying to guilt me into letting her stay. But I saw through it. I told her if she didn't leave by the end of the week, I'd call the cops. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. She stormed out of the house that afternoon, slamming doors, throwing accusations my way. I sat down alone and thought about everything, how naive I'd been, how I never saw the signs, how I'd loved her even when I knew she was probably cheating. I felt betrayed, broken, but also angry. Angry at her for lying, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, and angry at Mike for being a part of it. I knew I'd have to rebuild from this somehow. I'd been through heartbreak before, but this felt different. It was like my entire world had shattered in one moment. Over the next few days, I made plans to get her out of the house peacefully. I didn't want a scene, I just wanted her gone and for me to start healing. I contacted a lawyer, made arrangements to have her served with papers, and started thinking about what my next moves would be. I knew I couldn't stay here, not with her still in my house, still pretending everything was fine. I needed to clear my head, get some space, and figure out what I really wanted. I also knew that I couldn't keep this bottled up. She'd betrayed me, and I had to find a way to move past this, even if it meant starting over alone. All the while, I kept asking myself how I got here. How I, a guy who thought he had a simple, honest life, ended up in this mess. But I also understood something. I was done being the fool. I was done pretending that her lies didn't hurt, that her betrayal was something I could just brush off. I was hurt, yes, but I was also angry. And that anger, for now, was my fuel to get through this. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to reclaim my life, even if it meant doing it alone. The day Emily finally left, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. She packed her bags and stormed out of the house, cursing and telling me I was a controlling freak, that she'd never love me again. Honestly, I didn't care much about her words anymore. All I wanted was for her to be gone and for me to finally breathe without that heavy weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. After she left, the house was eerily quiet. No more sneaky footsteps, no more late-night whispers, no more her voice trying to guilt me into believing I was the crazy one. Just silence. I looked around and saw all the things that reminded me of how much I had loved her, how much I had believed in us. Now, all I could see were the broken pieces of what I thought was my life. But even in that silence, I knew I couldn't stay bitter forever. I had to face the reality of what happened and decide what I was going to do next. The first thing I did was block her number. I didn't want her calling me, trying to guilt me, or worse, trying to come back and manipulate me. I needed space, and I needed to focus on myself for a while. The pregnancy. Yeah, that still haunted me. I wondered what kind of mother she'd be, how she'd try to manipulate the situation now that she was alone. I also reached out to a lawyer to start the process of separating legally. I didn't want her having any claim over the house, or the baby for that matter. I knew I'd have to fight for custody if she tried to keep the pregnancy alive in her favor, but I was prepared for that. I wanted to be the best dad I could be, but I wouldn't let her manipulate the situation to her advantage. She lied to me, betrayed me, and now I had to protect myself and my future. What really got to me was how she kept trying to spin her betrayal. She called a few times, crying, trying to say she made a mistake, that she loved me, that she'd change. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game. I'd seen her bitchy, manipulative side firsthand, and I wasn't about to fall for her tricks again. I told her to stay away from me, that I needed time to heal, and that I'd decide what was best for the baby after I'd sorted myself out. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work and tried to keep busy. I wanted to keep my mind off her, off the betrayal, off Mike, and just focus on what I could control. I started seeing a counselor to help process everything, because, honestly, the emotional toll was worse than I expected. I felt broken, angry, and betrayed, but I also knew I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't let her ruin me completely. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot from this mess. I learned that trust is fragile, that sometimes people you love can turn out to be strangers. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need someone who lies and cheats to define my life. I've got to rebuild my sense of self, find happiness again, and maybe someday trust someone new, but never again blindly. This whole experience has been a brutal lesson in honesty, betrayal, and the importance of paying attention to the signs. I don't regret loving Emily, but I do regret not seeing what was really going on sooner. Now, I just want to focus on myself, my future, and my kid if she decides to keep it. I'll be okay. I have to be. It's been a few weeks since Emily moved out, and honestly, I feel like I'm finally starting to breathe again. The house is quiet, and I've taken down most of the pictures of us. It's strange how much space can do for your mind. The silence is deafening, but it's also healing. I've learned to accept that some things can't be fixed, at least not the way I once thought they could. Trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to rebuild, and I've come to terms with that. I've been focusing on myself more than ever. Work is keeping me busy, but I've also started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the chaos. I even signed up for a few new hobbies, something I never thought I'd do, but it's helping me find my footing again. I think the hardest part was realizing I had to let go of the hope that she'd change, that she'd come back and confess everything. That's never going to happen, and honestly, I don't want her back. Not like that. The pregnancy still weighs on me sometimes. I wonder what's going on with her, whether she's still planning to keep the baby. I know she's trying to manipulate the situation, but I refuse to let her pull me back in. I want to be there for my child if it's mine, but I won't let her guilt or lies control me anymore. I've learned it's better to step back and let things unfold naturally without forcing myself into a situation that only hurt me. Looking back on everything, I realize how naive I was. I believed in the vows, in her words, in the idea of a perfect life. But life isn't perfect, and people aren't always honest. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware, and more careful about who I trust. It's a hard lesson, but a necessary one. I won't be blindsided like that again. As I sit here writing this down, I feel a strange sense of closure. Not happiness exactly, more like acceptance. I know I'll be okay. I know I'll rebuild what's left of my life stronger and wiser. And I know that someday I'll find someone who values honesty, loyalty, and love, someone who won't tear my world apart just because they're bored or selfish. For now, I'm just grateful for this moment of clarity. I've faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but I've also found a new sense of strength. Life goes on, and no matter how much it hurts sometimes, I'll keep moving forward. I have to, for me and for whatever future I choose to build.